Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Sarah Lentini, President and CEO of the Greece Regional Chamber of Commerce, and it's my great pleasure and our great pleasure to welcome Coach Jim Johnson, who's going to be leading a presentation for us this morning. Before I turn this over to him, I want to just, read you a little introduction that I think gives you a very specific piece of context for Coach Jim Johnson. In 2006, a decision based on kindness during a high school basketball game turned Coach Jim Johnson into a national news celebrity and an authority on the subject of making dreams come true. Now, in his presentations around the country, Coach, as he is so affectionately called, emphasizes the importance of teamwork, sportsmanship, and leadership, the same concepts that helped him develop winning high school basketball teams for more than 30 years. And of course, he is from right here in Greece and has been a pivotal part of the Greece Central School District. Coach has appeared on Oprah, Good Morning America, ESPN, and dozens of national TV and radio shows, including the Chamber's own Business Voice. I was lucky enough to get to interview him as well. In 2011, he released his first book, A Coach and a Miracle, Life Lessons from a Man Who Believed in an Autistic Boy, and all of you will be receiving a copy. Take a look at this video and you'll see why we are so very happy to have him here today. Let's turn our attention and give a warm welcome. You're going to be, you have to imagine, Jim, because I asked everyone to mute themselves, that we are all cheering you on, and I, for one, applaud you for everything that you do. Welcome.
Thank you.
What we all want in life is a shot. But what we do with it, that's the story we all want to tell.
I've coached for 25 years and I've never experienced that, the emotional high of what happened.
What happened for Jason McElwain, or J-Mac as his friends call him, is about more than a shot. Diagnosed with autism at 2 years old, now identified as highly functioning, he's never considered himself different or separate, especially when it comes to sports.
Sports has always been, how could I say, his equalizer. He's just like any of the other kids out there.
It's not really a big deal at all. I'm just normal like other people. It's the way I am.
At 5'6", J-Mac didn't make the junior varsity basketball team at his high school, Greece Athena, near Rochester, New York. Instead, he became team manager, a role he now has for the varsity as a senior. In the last 3 years, in his white shirt and black tie, he's missed only one game.
We want to practice. I set up the clock and get the water in the games and be enthusiastic.
As this season was wrapping up, Coach Johnson approached Jason with an idea about the Trojans' final home game of the season.
I said, I'm really going to look to try to get you in the game, but remember, I can't promise you that. And he goes, okay, Coach.
February 15th, Greece Athena against Spencerport, senior night. With word out that Jason might play, the student section printed signs of J-Mac's face, just in case. And with 4:19 left in the game, with the Trojans up by 20, Coach called down to the end of the bench for number 52.
I just kind of turned and pointed at him, and he almost ran right on the court. He was so excited.
Hey, Jay, you got to check in. So he hits the buzzer. He doesn't go anywhere. It's like, now you go on the court. He was so caught up in the moment.
He came into the game. They all stood up and they put the signs, the pictures of him up, and I got really emotional. And I sat down and started crying.
With 3:46 left, Jason got the ball.
when he missed that first three, I was like, oh, and then it airball, and I was like, man, I really just want to see him score one time.
I put my head in my hands like, dear God, please, just get him a basket.
Then, with 3:12 left, another chance.
That third trip down the court. Imagine.
As soon as I started hitting my first shot, I just kept shooting, and I was just hot as a pistol.
Shot after shot after shot kept going in.
The basket was like this big, huge bucket, and I was shooting like they were free throws. This is a big, huge bucket that's like huge.
And I was like, oh my God, is this really happening? He has more points than me, so he's got bragging rights over me.
He was unstoppable for that moment in time. He was unstoppable.
He comes down the court right at the end with like 3 seconds left, and he hits this one that's, probably like an NBA three. As soon as the gun ended, they stormed the court. I couldn't, I just couldn't dream anything like that.
It felt like we won a championship. Everyone was just so happy for me.
In that 4 minutes, 19 seconds, Jason was 7 for 13, 6 of 10 from three-point range, 20 points in all. In his first and only varsity basketball game, J-Mac was the high scorer.
Truly the most incredible moment I've ever had in coaching. I was so touched, and it was just so special to me that a young man, his dream came true, and that I could help that. It was awesome.
What we all want in life is a shot. J-Mac took his, and now it's a story we can all tell.
Isn't that the essence of a successful team, in the fact that you shine the light on one of your team members? Well, today I'm excited to be here, and I thank the Grease Chamber for inviting me. And in this, my promise to you is that through this journey, I'm going to give you 4 keys to help you become a better leader, to build a successful team. And you also get a bonus. Since I've done a lot of presentations around the country, I'm going to give you 5 keys to help you become a more powerful presenter. So to do that, let's start the journey, because I'm going to come back to J-Mac's season and reinforce these 4 keys. But before we do that, I need to share a little bit about my journey as a coach. So early on, after I graduated from college, I came back to my hometown of Greece, a suburb of Rochester, New York, and I wanted to become a head coach at a school in the Rochester area. And after only 3 years as an assistant coach, my dream came true. I became a head coach at a school about 20 minutes from where I grew up. And man, I was excited. I thought, I'm going to lead this team that wasn't very good, by the way, from the outhouse to the penthouse in a very short period of time. In fact, I thought I would do it the first year. Well, after our first 2 games, we were 1-1. I thought, I'm okay, I've got this. Then with my great coaching acumen, I led that team to 17 consecutive losses. And then I left that job because I didn't like what the administration had to say to me. Of course, what they said to me was, you're fired. And it was an extremely humbling experience, but it ended up being one of the best professional experiences in my life. And here's why. There were 2 motivators. Number one, is I realized this arrogant 25-year-old had a lot to learn about leading and building teams. And number 2 is it gave me motivation to prove that that school was wrong for letting me go. So with that in mind, I started to make a study of leadership and team building. I've read hundreds of books on it, and certainly ended up having 30 years as a head coach. So let me take you a little bit through that journey as we get back to J-Mac's season. In doing that, after losing that job, I got a break. I got a call from a local junior college coach. His name was Bill Van Gundy. And if you've not heard about Coach Van Gundy, if you follow basketball, you probably have heard the Van Gundy name because both his sons, Jeff and Stan, have been head coaches in the NBA. Well, Coach Van Gundy took me under his wing and he really shared with me a lot of ideas on how to build a successful team. And we had a really good season. But not only did I learn from Coach Van Gundy, but I continue to grow and learn from so many areas, including resources from books and seminars and clinics and so forth, trying to become a better coach to lead a successful team. Well, my real dream is I wanted to get back into high school, even though I had a good experience in college. And the next year, I got an opportunity to coach at a smaller school about 30 minutes from where I grew up, called Leroy High School. Now, when I took over, the program had been a little bit disappointing in the fact that they'd only won 2 games the year before. So we created this environment, which I'm going to talk about these 4 keys in a little bit, where we could establish some areas to build this team. In the first year, we had 8 wins. In the second year, we had 13. So we were making progress in a measurable way. But my real dream was I wanted to be a head coach in my hometown of Greece, New York. And after 2 years at Leroy, although I loved it there, my dream came true. I got an opportunity to come back to my hometown and be the head coach at Greece Olympia High School, a program I thought Leroy was in tough shape. Well, Greece Olympia, they had only won 2 games the previous 2 seasons. So it was in dire straits. So we had a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, in our second season, we had a winning season. I thought, we got this. No, not quite. The third season, we plummeted back to only 2 wins. So I knew that we still had a lot of work to do, which I'm going to share these 4 keys in just a moment. And in doing that, we started to build and build. And I'm happy to tell you, in our last 3 years at Greece Olympia, we had 3 of the best seasons in the school history. We were #1 seed in the sectional tournament the last 2 years, which the school had never done. And we made it to the sectional semifinals, the furthest school had ever gone, 3 consecutive years. But after that 7th year, one of the other sister schools in Greece, I thought was the best basketball position. And it opened up and I decided to go for it. Unfortunately, I was offered that job. It was called Greece Athena High School. And there, they had some tradition, although they had a losing season the year before we got there. But they had won a state championship years earlier. And I felt it was a program that we could really build successfully. Unfortunately, that part I was right, because the first season we had a winning season. In fact, in my 20 years, we never had a losing season there. But after 7 years, I still had this big stumbling block, because in coaching, you're offered measured by how you do in the postseason. And there we were falling short. In fact, my first 7 years at Greece Athena, we never even got back to the sectional semifinals, although we were winning some league titles and winning seasons every year. Well, we finally got back in my 8th season in the semifinal. Yes, you guessed it. We lost again. Well, the next year, I had a very special young man come into the program. You saw the video. His name is Jason McElwain. The world now knows him as J-Mac, a name I tagged him because I couldn't pronounce his last name. In fact, butchering his last name would have been a misdemeanor. I would have been on death row. I could not pronounce his last name. Well, Jason tried out for our JV team. And after a couple of days of tryouts, our JV coach came in and said, Coach, Jason's not a very good player, but man, he's got a big heart. I think we should keep him in the program. I said, well, what do you got in mind? He says, I'm going to offer him the team manager's job, but I'm going to also let him practice with the team. And that's what he did. And there were some trials and tribulations early, but because the culture in the program was pretty strong, I really was proud of how the players embraced him. In fact, it really warmed my heart, because Jason would sit on the bench for the JV games, and you're going to be a little shocked by this, but he would get a little emotional in the games. And after the game, he'd be a tad disheveled. And it would always warm my heart to see one of the varsity players come out, straighten out his shirt and tie, and get him ready so he could sit on the varsity bench. Well, that season on the varsity, we had another good year. We made the sectional semifinal now for the 5th time. And we lost at the buzzer. Oh, we were devastated. But that wasn't going to stop J-Mac. He was more bound and determined to make the team as a junior. And what was different about Jason is he had this great perseverance. And he came to all our off-season workouts because normally if a player doesn't make our program, they usually don't come back and try again. That wasn't Jason. He came to all our off-season workouts. He tried out as a junior. And I brought him in after a couple of days. I said, Jason, fortunately, you're not quite good enough to make the team, but I would like to offer you the team manager's job for the varsity. Well, he quickly embraced that role. He loved being part of the team and helping us. And I learned so much from the perspective from Jason. In fact, at our first team meeting his junior year, he stood up. He said, Coach, can I share something? I said, sure. We are going to develop this mantra. We're going to stay focused, and we're going to help you win your first Section 5 championship. I said, well, thanks, Jay. Well, we had another good season his junior year. We got to the sectional semifinal now for the 6th time in my career. We lost at the buzzer again, this time to our crosstown rival, Greece Arcadia. We were really disappointed, but this didn't stop J-Mac. He was more bound and determined to make the team as a senior. When he tried out his senior year, after a couple days of tryouts, I brought him in and I said, J-Mac, I've got some good news and some bad news. He said, Coach, give me the bad news first. And I said, well, unfortunately, you're still not quite good enough to make the team. And this time he's visibly disappointed. You see his head drop down. He was upset. But I said, I do have some good news. And his head popped back out. He said, yeah, Coach, what do you got in mind? I said, for senior night, I'm going to give you a uniform and hopefully get you in the game. Well, he's pretty excited about that uniform idea. In fact, periodically, he would ask me about that uniform. And of course, I define periodically as about every other day. He was really excited. Well, we were supposed to have a great team, Jason Sr., and we got off to a wonderful start. We were 2-0 after a tip-off tournament. But then adversity struck. In fact, I'm going to share a little bit about my book at the end. I have a discount on my website. It goes through the whole story because I don't have time. But all I can tell you is that we had a lot of adversity between the players, the parents, and one of our assistant coaches. And it really made our team a tremendous strife. And this is where the 4 keys that I'm going to share right now is something that we were always stressing, but we had to really focus and refocus on these 4 keys to try to unite the team back. So in doing that, the first thing is the team acronym is building trust. That is so essential. We'll delve into that in just a moment. Secondly is the E, effective communication. The A, of course, is getting all involved. And the M is measurement. So with that in mind, after that good start, but having the adversity, we started to struggle. We were actually losing some games we shouldn't. And so I really had to go back and focus on building trust. And I highly recommend in any team you're building, whether it's athletic, business, whatever, is that you got to have a plan on how intentionally you can build trust. Because without trust, your team will break down. And this is something we had to refocus. So the first thing is I had to really be aware of saying what I'm going to do and doing what I'm going to say. In other words, align my words and actions and being really consistent. Because I really was emphasizing things like you got to be on time. I had to make sure I was always early. And I think it's really important that we aligned our actions and words consistently. The second key was that we had to building the truth. And as the Bible says, the truth will set you free. So therefore, you really had to open up. And there's 2 keys, I believe, as a leader. You need to be authentic. So you've got to share the truth consistently. You can't say one thing and do another. And the second part is you got to be willing to be vulnerable. And I started to open up because I had never gone through an adversity like I had in this year's team. So I knew that I had to be vulnerable and that I didn't have all the answers, but we had to work together to do that. In fact, I really made a key was that I made sure that every year I had shared with my team that I wasn't going to drink alcohol during the season. Well, to do that, I had to make sure that I couldn't get pulled over for a DWI after saying that. So telling the truth, because to me, building trust is like building a bank account. And if you continue to put deposits in, then good things are going to happen. But if you continue to take withdrawals out, bad things are going to happen, of course. Well, with that in mind, remember that you got to align your actions in what you do and what you say is so key. And number two is you have to be authentic and being willing to be vulnerable to tell the truth. That is so powerful. We spent a lot of time sharing ideas. And the third thing we really had to refocus on was catching people doing the right thing and making sure that we were praising them. And it wasn't just nice job, Johnny. It was praising like, Johnny, great job hustling and diving on the floor for that loose ball or rotating over and taking the charge. But you had to be specific, and we really had to build that back up, that we showed that we cared. As the old adage, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And we really had to build that trust account. Because remember this, I don't know how many of you agree with this, but it takes time to build trust, but you can destroy it with one bad choice. So you've got to be consistent day in and day out on those three keys. So find whatever works for you, but be intentional about building trust. So in that, we had lost some games, and we actually lost 3 of our next 5 games. And we were going into our Christmas tournament, Jason's senior year, at Fairport High School, which is the biggest school in Rochester. And I thought we had a chance to beat Fairport, even though they were very good, but not the way we were playing or the fact that we were not too well together. So the first night of the tournament, we played the opening round game, and we won in a very close game. And in the second game, Fairport beat a team that we had barely beaten 2 weeks earlier by 40 points. So the next day, because it was during Christmas break, we had what we call a shoot around. It's a short practice. And we got together. And normally we'd bring balls out and we would go through some plays and do some shooting. But this is where the E kicked in. I knew that I had to do something different because we still had a lot of work to do in building that trust account. So when they came into the gym that morning, I shocked them. I didn't bring any balls out. I had them sit in the bleachers. And then the first key, I think, in being a great leader to build a team is to become a better public speaker. And so in doing that, remember that public speaking, and I'm going to give you some tips a little bit later on, is a skill. And early on in my career, I know I didn't want to speak publicly at all. Now I can't wait to do it. So it's a skill that we can all get better in. And with that in mind, when I sat them down, I looked them in the eyes and I said, guys, I don't want to go to the game tonight. And they were kind of shocked. I said, unless we decide that we're going to be a team together, Fairport's going to beat us by 50 points. And then they shared a couple ideas and motivation. But the best thing I did that day was I had to become a better listener. And the old adage that you have 2 ears and only 1 mouth is so important in communication, that you must listen twice as much as you talk. And that is so essential. So after I gave them that little talk, I said, guys, I don't have all the answers, but I need to listen to you. So let's be truthful to each other and share what we need to do to get this team back together. And they finally started to open up. And I'd be the first to admit, we didn't solve all the issues that day, but I could see a team that was more united and a little bit more pep in their step at leaving that gym that day. Well, that night, it reflected in our game because we played a much better game. And although we did not win the game, we lost at Fairport in overtime and showed what we could do if we started to unite. So I was encouraged, but I also realized that there was more work to do. And that's where we get into our next key. But before we do that, I just want to really emphasize this, is that especially in times like now, the adversity I had during that season, right now we're having a lot of adversity, COVID and other reasons, is that you've got to over-communicate and get to know your people better. So I just want to illustrate with that slide up there right now, is this is one example of something we would do. We would have them share and get to know each other better and try to build that trust account. So really come up with activities where you get to know your people better. And I think that's so powerful, which leads us into the third key, which is getting the A, which is all involved. In getting all involved, the best way that I found is you have to do a great job with your team meetings. And I think that is so essential. I often talk to leaders and they tell me they hate their meetings. And I'm like, whose fault is that? Right? Because as a leader, meetings should be very effective. And if they're not, then you got to change them. And so I want to go through the 5 meetings that we talked about and we did a lot. And the first one is just the 5-minute check-in. You can do that within business where, right now it could be a quick Zoom call at the beginning of the week to ask, how are you doing? What are you working on? How can I best support you? For us, it was, just before practice, checking in with guys. How are you doing? What can I help you with? Just kind of getting to know you. And I think that those are things that are really important, that you have those check-ins consistently. The second one is the one-on-one meeting. And we had done one-on-one meetings, but we did more that year than ever. And really trying to get to know our players better and better. And some were planned and some were not planned. But I think it's really essential that one-on-one right now, it might have to be Zoom, but really, again, over-communicating, getting to know your people was so helpful in trying to build that trust back with this team. The third one was our weekly meeting. And for a business, it's probably your leadership team in going through tactics. And we're going to go through a little bit more about that meeting. For us, it was our team because we didn't have a big team. And so we always had weekly, sometimes a couple meetings, and just going over tactics and reviewing. And I always talked about, you got to be the CRO as the leader, the chief reminding officer. And that's something I was always talking about, our vision and our mission and what direction and how we had to be united. So it's something you got to consistently do. And we would do at those meetings. And I'm going to talk a little bit more what you can do at that type of meeting, because I think it's so essential. The fourth one for us was our team strategy meeting. And for us, that was our captain's meetings. And every week we had 3 tri-captains that year. And we would often invite another player from the team. And I would start by giving them questions like, how is our chemistry? What should we focus on this week? How can I best support you? How can our staff best support you? So those are the things, and we really got to the point where we were opening up, and that was very helpful because the leaders on the team had to really be the ones that were leading our team to get this group back together, which was so essential. And then the last one is the quarterly team building meeting. And for us, at the end of each regular season, we would put all the balls away for our first practice, and we would actually have a team building session. And that was very helpful in getting us ready for the postseason. We also did team building sessions in the off season in various ways. And I think it's so essential that you consistently are being intentional in building your team so you have that great environment that people want to be a part of. And so those are the things we were doing. And just to go through, for the regular team meeting, remember, number 1 is get the right people in the room. Now, for us, it was the entire team, but I highly recommend for businesses, it's your leadership team. Number 2 is that it's really important that you're clear on the agenda, but also I think it was important at times to have some openings to get people to share something that we need to maybe cover during the meeting. I think that's really important, just to go around the room and get some ideas from what's going on to help with that. Just like in business, it would be, what are you guys working on? How can we best support you? Is it something that we need to focus on today? The third thing is I liked often to start meetings with a positive. So we would sometimes do a team wraparound where they would just share something good that came out in their life, whether it was something did well in school or at home or something about basketball. And I think we didn't do it all the time, but I think it's good to start with a little positively, especially if you're going through some tough times. The fourth one is such a major key, and that is the fact that you have to be comfortable to encourage debate. is I used to always tell our players, we want the best answers. And the best answer is not always from me. In fact, it often isn't. So I had to be a good listener, listen to our players, listen to my staff, because I always told them what I was working on is trying to do what's best for the team. So I would encourage debate. Now, with this major rule, you could not hurt the person. You could debate the idea, but not the person. And when we did that and stayed to that rule, it really was a healthy debate that helped us work things out. Then there, you got to have clarity of what you're going to do at the end of the meeting, so you're moving forward and getting ready for the next meeting. So having meetings being effective was a really powerful thing that helped us start to unite the team and get it going. And then the last thing we had to do is we had to refocus on our goals. And that's one of the challenges I'm going to give you a little bit later. In that we always had done a goals meeting at the beginning of the season, and there we'd meet at my house, we'd go over rules and expectations, we'd go over our vision and mission, and we'd also talk about team goals, and we'd write them down, because I used to give my team a quote every day. A couple of my favorite goal setting quotes was, when you think it, ink it. We always encourage our players to write it down. And another one is, you can't hit a target you don't have. So it was really important that we went back and we had another goals meeting. And I just want to give you an example of one little thing that we did. So I'm going to give you just an idea, is that I'd like you to take 30 seconds. And I want you to write down your 3 most important goals. You write at least one business goal, one personal goal, and one other. All right, you're on the clock, go. Halfway done, 15 seconds. Three, two, one. All right, hopefully you got that done. If you hadn't, that's something you can do for homework. But this is what we taught our players all the time, is that we made sure that we would have them get out index cards. And on the first card, we would have them write, I am responsible, because you have to take charge of your life. Another thing we often ask them to write, because we were trying to help their self-esteem, is the second card we'd ask them to write, I like myself. I think that's so important, because to help others, the first person you got to care about is yourself, and then you should be able to spread that love to others. And then write out, in this case it was 3 goals, but we would do more goals than that, and have them write their goals out. Then what we encourage them to do is every morning to have those index cards, get in front of the mirror and say, I am responsible, I like myself, and then our goals. And then from there, we would also encourage them just before they go to bed to do the same thing again. Because as I mentioned before, you can't hit a target you don't have. So when we did that, we actually went on a really good run. And we won 7 out of our last 8 games going into senior night. A senior night was on February 15th. On February 13th, we gave J-Mac his first jersey. It was way too big. He didn't care. In fact, there was a rumor going around school that he slept in it for 2 straight nights. Well, senior night came, and on February 15th, is a memory I will always cherish. Because what we do is on senior night, we honor the seniors before the game. We bring the parents and guardians. But to see J-Mac now embracing his parents, instead of in his white shirt and black tie, he now is donning number 52. To see him hug his parents in uniform is a memory I will always cherish. When the game begins, and J-Mac, my goal for him was to try to get him in with enough time so he could score a basket. I thought if he could score a basket, wow, that's something he'll keep for the rest of his life. Well, after 3 quarters of the game, we got everybody in. So with just over 4 minutes to go, I thought the time was right. I pointed it to him. He nearly ran on the court. He was so excited. Then what happened next profoundly touched me. What I didn't know is that one of our parents had made all these placards, these pictures of J-Mac's face, and he put them on paint sticks and he gave them to our student body. And he said, if J-Mac gets in, to show that. Well, when J-Mac entered the game, I saw those, and I'm usually a pretty macho guy, but I sat down and tears started to roll down my face. I was profoundly touched. Jason's now in his first varsity basketball game. The first time he gets the ball, he is in the right corner for a three-pointer. He lets it go. The crowd stands in anticipation. It misses by like 6 feet. Now, I know you're not supposed to pray in the public schools, but I am praying. Please, God, please just get him one basket. Well, the next possession, Jason actually has a much shorter shot from about 10 feet. This time he lets it go. It hits the backboard. It hits the rim. And it falls off. And the crowd grows. But I'm thinking, all right, God's starting to listen. We're getting closer. Then the third possession, he has a three-pointer from the right wing. He lets it go. This time, magic. The place explodes. And I'm thinking to myself, God must be a basketball fan. Not only has Jason scored, he's got a three-pointer. It can't get any better than this, right? Wrong. For the next 3 minutes, J-Mac turns into his boyhood idol, the late, great Kobe Bryant. And he starts making shot after shot. The two things I'll never forget. With about a minute to go, of course, I'm still sitting down, tears rolling down my face, and I get a tap on my shoulder. I look behind me. It's J-Mac's mother. She's bawling her eyes out, and she says, Coach, this is the best gift you could have ever given my son. What would you have done? I cried harder. Then, this is how the game ends. Spencer Port, our opponent that night, and they want to give kudos to their players and their coach. They were great sports. They actually score, and our player takes the ball out of bounds, and he throws it this time to J-Mac instead of our point guard. And J-Mac's dribbling down as I see the clock ticking down, 4, 3, 2, and all of a sudden I see Jason pull up like 2 feet behind the arc, almost an NBA three. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Jason, don't shoot from there. That's way too far. He launches this rainbow. Swish. I look over, our student body runs on the floor, our players run on the floor. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm living the movie Rudy, but this is really true. Then our players put Jason up on their shoulders, and he's got the game ball over his head. And at this point, I have no idea how many points it is. And our public address announcer comes on and says, the leading scorer for the Trojans, J-Mac, with 20 points. And of course, my math brain, I'm thinking if he played the whole game, he scores 160. That's pretty good. Well, what was really neat was that night was the essence of team. Because when Jason entered the game, I never asked the team to pass him the ball. Yet in those last 4 minutes, he was the only one to shoot. In fact, I still see Jason a lot. I kid him all the time. I said, Jason, I'm still looking for your first assist. You never passed the ball once. But it was just so remarkable. Well, the other neat thing is that I thought I did it for all the right reasons, and we had no media there, and I thought that's where it would end. But what I didn't realize is the next day, Jason's speech pathologist, I worked with Jason for 4 years, had never come to a game, but he came to that, and he was so touched that he actually called one of our local TV stations at school the next day, Channel 8, and they came and borrowed the video. And from there, it just grew and grew and grew, and it just got crazy. And what I'm going to do, though, is that's how we're going to end the story. How did the rest of that season go? So what we're going to do now is talk to you a little bit about powerful presentations. We'll have an opportunity to do a little Q&A, and then I'll close on how that season ended. So 5 keys to making yourself a better presenter. And these are mostly live, although I'll give you a couple ideas. And now that I'm doing much more virtual, and hopefully we'll get back to live here sooner than later. But in those 5, I'm not going to give you a lot of technology tips because that's not my strength. In fact, my buddy Mark is here to help me with the video because he's a good man. But that's not my strength. But as far as I've done hundreds of presentations around the country, so I want to give you these 5 keys. And the keys are the following. I used an acronym SPEAK, like the word team, and except that I replace the K with the C. So as you see on there, the first one is the start, how you introduce yourself. The second is your preparation for the P. Then the E is your eye contact, and we're going to also add engagement. Of course, A is your agenda or your flow of your presentation, and the C is close. So in doing that, the first thing is, how do you start your presentation? I believe you need to capture their attention immediately. If you notice with how I started mine, is I started with a video that was a story that I believe captures people's attention right away. Now, not everyone is going to have a video like that, but you can start with a story. Another couple of ways that you can catch their attention right away is to start with a question. Because you notice after the video, I asked a question, isn't that the essence of teamwork? So think of different ways that you can capture attention. We'll give you one more. It's a startling statistic, something that will capture their attention right away. So find ways, instead of coming out and just saying, it's great to be here, and just kind of wander in for 5 to 10 minutes. People really don't care. They want, their impression is right away. So make sure that you capture their attention. The second, the P, is preparation. And to do speeches or presentations, you need to practice. I believe you should write it out. You should have notes, but then get to the point where you don't even need notes. Because I have notes, I've written it out, but I've practiced this presentation a number of times. And not only do I do the whole presentation a few times, but I also do the opening and close even more, because they're so important in getting off to a good start and closing well. The other part is the PowerPoint. And as you notice, I do have a PowerPoint, and didn't always have, and I don't believe you have to have a PowerPoint. I know it's something a lot of people use, but I've seen a lot of presentations where I've walked out disappointed because the speaker is using the PowerPoint instead of them. And what I mean by that is they're literally just reading the PowerPoint. So use the PowerPoint to enhance your presentation, not be your presentation. And so it's really important, use pictures on your slides, use as few words as you can, because they're here to listen to the speaker, not to just look at a PowerPoint. I think you can use it to enhance it, but not to replace it. The next one, the E, is eye contact, which is certainly harder in virtual, but you got to make sure that you're looking more at the camera as much as you possibly can. And the other part about that, so when you're doing live presentations, is just looking at people's eyes and just gradually 5 or 6 seconds, then look at somebody else's. You don't want to be an alien and zoom in and just look at their eyes for 5 minutes so they think you're really strange. But you've got to be casually looking in their eyes. That's a great way to start the engagement. And then engage people with stories, illustrations, ask questions. And another powerful thing is the pause. So when you ask a question, pause. Or if you tell a story at the end, pause. Let it sink in. Or if you have a joke or something where you may get a laugh, pause. So give them opportunities to think and get engaged with your presentation. The A is the planning, the agenda. Now, I'm going a little outside the box but I put them into 2 acronyms, team and speak, to help you remember the keys. But kind of the initial thing is, when you're starting a presentation, I would recommend you start with 3 ideas that you want to get across, and then illustrate them and have stories to back them up. And you sometimes statistics or whatever to get the flow. And make sure that you write it all out first, and then put it into notes, and just whatever is best. Sometimes I put in my cards just to look at, just find what's best for you, and then going back, you need to practice. The other part is the Q&A, which we're going to do in a little bit, is that I don't believe you should end your presentation with a Q&A, because I've seen speakers that have actually done a pretty good job, but their presentation ends with a dud because they either get no questions or they end with a question which didn't really stimulate the audience. So I always say before I close, we're going to open up to questions, and then I usually share a story, which I'll talk to you about and finish it, which is the C in closing. In closing, I think there's two things. Make it memorable, try to do some type of wrap up, and also give them a call to action, which I think is really powerful, is to give them something that they can do to implement some of the ideas that you shared. And I'm going to give you some closes, ideas, and I'm going to finish with a story to remind you. So let's open it up. If you have questions, certainly in the chat room, you can do that to Sarah, and Sarah will pass them on, and then I'll close with a story and a couple call to actions. So Sarah, do we have any questions for anybody?
Actually, we do. And first of all, I just want to say, I know you're not done, Jim, and I love actually what you're talking about with respect to closing. I find it incredibly useful for myself personally. And we do have a question that was emailed to me a few minutes ago from one of our participants.
Sure.
Hello. In this era of globalization, it has been observed that organizations that embraced diversity and have employees from diverse backgrounds often lead in creativity and innovation. What is your advice on how a leader should prepare oneself to be able to create a functional, diverse workplace?
It's a great question. I think the most important thing you had, because our teams were very diverse, is the fact that as the leader, you have to define what type of people are you looking for your team. So I think that's the first thing that's really important. And it's another talk I do where I actually define some of the areas, like we want our players to be humble. We wanted them to be team oriented, would be a couple examples. And with that in mind, when you have clarity of how you're going to choose the people, then I think it's really important that you're open to hiring the best people based on what they're all about, and not the color of their skin or their religious beliefs, or whether they're male or female. It's really important that you develop a criteria of what you're looking for in team members, and making sure that in fitting that, it does not matter, because diversity is really important to have an effective team. It's something I learned immensely as my team became more and more diverse, and how important that was.
Terrific. I think you have a follow-up question as well, and also some a comment that's coming from the audience. So let me start with the follow-up question, which is, thanks, coach. As a coach, how would you praise your players so they don't lose humility, but also feel motivated to give their best?
It's a great question again, because one of the things I think is so important as a leader, in my case being a coach, was that I got to know each person as best I can on an individual basis, because you need to know what makes them tick and what motivates them best. As far as, I think it's always important to have specific praise for your players or your team members. And as I mentioned earlier, for example, we would try to make a specific praise. Like if somebody really hustled and deflected a pass, we would share that. We wouldn't just say, nice job, Johnny. We'd say, Johnny, great hustle. We loved how you got back in the passing lane and deflected. So the more clear you are of what you're praising, I think that's really important. But also understand of how, like there were some guys I could really get on and that would motivate them. There were some other guys that if I got on them pretty good, they would go into a shell and they would lose interest. So I think it's really important as a leader that you know your people, praise them as much as you possibly can in specific, but also talk about what makes a good team member. Like I used to talk a lot about humility is so important. So even though we want to hear praise, it's important to give praise, but also remember that we're always looking for people that can accept praise, but stay humble.
Terrific. You have a couple of other questions up here. The next one is, how do you deal with negativity if a teammate is negative, a coach, an employee, etc.?
Well, and negativity is always part of a team. There's no question about it. And so you have to have clarity of your expectations. I mentioned that what I call the CRO, that we were always talking about what our mission statement was to develop winners on and off the court. And we would define what a winner on the court, what the winner off the court is. So it was really important that you have clarity in sharing what is most important consistently, and that you had to be aware of when there's negativity, that was not acceptable. Now, when I say that, a great quote I used to give my players all the time is, attitudes are contagious. Is yours worth catching? So with that in mind, we would always talk about negative body language. That was not acceptable. And sometimes, you see, I try not to embarrass players, but I would make it clear to the team sometimes. I would say, Johnny, you need to change your body language. And, I would share the team, that's not acceptable. So that, sometimes you do have to call people out. And sometimes you have to do it in front of the team. One-on-one meetings, as we talked about, is the way we did it a lot. But your team members have to be clear of what the expectations are and what you accept on a consistent basis is what you're all about as a leader. So if you allow negativity to continue to flow, that's your fault as a leader. You got to stop that as soon as you possibly can. And you got to address it. But you got to stay positive as a leader yourself.
Terrific. We've got two more questions that I'm going to read out, and then I think that might be about all the time we have for questions. So please feel free to follow up with Coach directly. But let's start with this one. Coach, did you believe in applying every rule the same way to each player, or did you decide based on the player and the situation?
I think the situation does have a factor. I think there's a couple things as a leader. I think you have to have certain non-negotiables. For an illustration, like one of the best players I ever coached was a guy named Anthony Lamb that's getting ready. Hopefully he's going to get drafted in the NBA. But Anthony is a sophomore in our semifinal game. One of my non-negotiables is you cannot be late. And if you were a starter, you didn't start. And I remember he came in late for our morning free throws and he didn't start. And some of our captains or seniors came to me and said, Coach, you can't do this. I said, no, that's a non-negotiable. So I think there are some things as a leader that you must be strong on. They're non-negotiables and you got to treat everybody the same. But there are situations where you got to be appropriate for what the situation is and how it can best be handled for that individual as well as for the benefit of the team.
Terrific. And the last question, and then I'm just going to read out some comments because I know then you want to do a close, which is what I'm taking away as a very big takeaway from this. I've never structured what I present that way, and I want to try it. So this last question is, in addition to negativity, how do you handle a team member resistant to coaching and change?
That's a powerful question, and I'll start with the proactive is that you got to really make sure that you're clear of the type of people you want on your team. And being coachable was one of our keys. So, and certainly I would say that there were times that where people were uncoachable. Usually when that was the case, I would set up a one-on-one meeting and I would share what I expect and what I'm seeing and really get clarity that the player had to change. As I always told the players, when we chose the people on the team, we had spent a lot of time deciding if you're the right person to be on our team. But sometimes we would make a mistake. And I said, I would never come, once you were chosen, I would try to get rid of you. But if you became such a distraction to the team and you didn't change, then that would be what we have to do once in a while, is we'd have to ask that player that you're not okay on the team anymore. We tried not to do that. That was kind of our last fallout, but it's something that you had to be aware of, because if somebody's consistently uncoachable and negative, they become a cancer, and you can't be successful if you don't cut that cancer out.
Terrific. All very, very good information. And that's what I want to share. There are many comments in the chat box for people to read, including many comments, Coach, thanking you and telling you what a great job you've done speaking, how very organized and helpful today's presentation has been. But I'm going to turn it back over to you for the close.
Well, thanks, Sarah. So in closing, let's come back to J-Mac Senior. He has this wonderful game. We're starting to get all this media attention. And of course, we had never won a Section 5 championship. So I'm trying to get this team ready. And I'll give you one illustration. After that game, the next week was what we call our February break, where our students are off from school, but our players come back for practice. And actually, I get up Monday morning, and at this point, we were starting to get some media attention. And I'm just about to go to practice because we didn't have school that day, and the phone rings. And I pick up the phone, and it's CBS Evening News. And they normally don't call the house. They said, Coach, we heard about the game. We're going to come in and do a story about it. Well, they showed that Thursday night, and after that, it just exploded. It went around the world, and it was crazy. Well, meanwhile, that week, we had a bye in the first round, so our quarterfinal game was a home game that Saturday. And give you an idea of media attention, unfortunately, we won that game pretty easily, but after the game, it was a typical post-game interview, People magazine. That's how crazy it got. In fact, after the game, I said to my athletic directors, we were going back to school and we're getting ready now for our semifinal. And I said, in case we have some media attention, do you mind if I get a sub? And I give you an idea. I thought it may be 1 or 2 days. It was 8 consecutive days I had a sub because it was just, media was crazy. And of course, we're trying to prepare for that semifinal. My big stumbling blocks, losing 6 times as a coach. Well, the semifinal was on Tuesday. And one of the things I changed that year is I knew that I had to stay stronger and be more positive when adversity struck in the postseason. That was something I analyzed that I didn't do very well. So in the semifinal game, we actually got up 10 at halftime. I thought, oh, we've finally done this. Well, our team implodes in the third quarter, and we're actually losing in the fourth quarter. But this time I was better. I stayed positive, I encouraged, and our players hung together, and they showed great resilience. We rallied, and we won the game. We were actually going to the sectional finals for the first time as a coach, and it was amazing. The next 3 days were like a mini Super Bowl week. We had a Japanese TV station come in. It was crazy. Well, Saturday night is the championship game at the Blue Cross Arena. And for those unfamiliar with the Blue Cross Arena, it seats about 11,000 people. And usually for a championship game, we would get maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. Well, we arrive at the arena that night. We walk in, and it's sold out. There's over 10,000 people there. And Channel 8 asked to interview me, and they asked me a few questions, and they said, Coach, do you mind if we interview J-Mac? I said, no. So I'm standing on the floor, and J-Mac's sitting behind me in the first row. And I turned to him, I said, Jason, Channel 8 wants to interview you. He stands up, he says, Coach, it's time to get focused. No media interviews. So I'm thinking we're ready for our first championship game. Well, I thought we were ready. J-Mac thought we were ready. But unfortunately, we weren't ready because we were down 14-3 after 4 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh. But I stayed positive. Our kids hung tough. We actually rallied. And late in the game, it was tied. And our point guard dribbles in, he penetrates, he passes the ball back out to one of our other players. Ironically, his name was Steve Kerr, not the guy that played in the NBA. He's presently the Golden State coach. But like Steve Kerr, when he played in the NBA, this Steve Kerr makes a 3. Our opponent comes down. They shoot a shot. I'm standing on the bench, all excited. There's a scramble for the rebound. Whack! I got tackled by my JV coach, which meant that we had become Section 5 champs. We had finally done it. And that's what it was all about. Is we take these keys of team, trust, and effective communication, and getting all about, and having a measurement system, you can build a championship team. And one of the challenges I want to give you is get back with your team. Refocus for this last quarter on your goals, both team and individual. That would be one challenge to set up that team meeting, to refocus this last quarter, to make it your best quarter for the year. And then I would love to stay in touch with you. And I do some individual coaching. So if I can ever help you, if you go to my website, coachjimjohnson.com, and you hit book Coach Johnson, my team will get a 20-minute complimentary call on how I can help you. And I'd be love to listen to you and help share anything to help you become a better leader and build your team or build a more powerful presentation. Because when you can present better, and you can build a team better, then you become better. And that's really what it's all about. It's trying to help you become more successful. So again, if I can help you any way, my book is on a discount. If you go to the website and go to products, you can get a discount, and I'd be glad to sign it for you. And we also include a complimentary bookmark. So thank you so much for having me. Again, there's a couple different ways you can stay in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you, get your feedback, and help you any way I can. God bless you, and go out and build your championship team. You can do it.
Thank you so much. This is Sarah Lentini, President and CEO of the Greece Regional Chamber once again. Thank you so much, Coach Jim Johnson. Terrific presentation, lots of great stuff to take away, and some calls to action for us to pay attention to as well. And I want to thank everybody who joined us here today. We look forward to talking with you and seeing you again very soon.